This is Middle East Brief with Avi Kaner, your daily intelligence update on what actually matters.
A few weeks ago, I recorded an episode about what I called President Trump's Bazaar Strategy. The idea was simple. Anyone who has spent time in the Middle East understands that negotiation is often a performance. Pressure, threats, walkaways, counteroffers, public posturing. And then, sometimes a deal. In a bazaar, the first offer is never the final offer. The walkout is often part of the negotiation. And the loudest argument does not always mean the deal is dead. But every bazaar has a limit. At some point, one side decides the other is not bargaining hard, but it is bargaining in bad faith. That may be where President Trump now believes he is in with the Iranian regime. This week, during remarks in Turkey, President Trump sounded like a man who has reached the end of his patience. He said, "I think it's over." He said he no longer wanted to deal with the Iranian regime. He called the regime liars, cheats, scum, and sick people. And he repeated the central red line: Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The language was not diplomatic, it was not polished, but it was crystal clear. Trump believes the Iranian regime cannot be trusted. And then came one of the most striking parts of his remarks. President Trump accused the Islamic Republic of killing 54,000 of its own people during anti-regime protests earlier this year. He said that when people ask why Iranians have not overthrown the regime, the answer is simple. They can't take over because they're dead. His criticism is no longer focused only on uranium enrichment. It is focused on the character of the regime itself, a regime that represses its own people. It funds terrorists, threatens its neighbors, attacks shipping, lies during negotiations, and then denies what it just agreed to. That brings us to the Strait of Hormuz. After the ceasefire, the world hoped the crisis was winding down. Instead, Iranian forces fired rockets at ships in one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz is not a local issue. It's a global artery. A significant share of the world's oil moves through those waters. When Iran or its proxies threaten that passage, they are not only threatening Israel, they are threatening the global economy, energy prices, commercial shipping, insurance markets, and the stability of every country that depends on the Gulf energy. The United States responded with force. President Trump said American forces struck back very powerfully against what he called very dangerous people from Iran. His message was unmistakable. You cannot negotiate a ceasefire in one room and fire rockets at ships in another. You cannot demand sanctions relief while threatening global commerce. You cannot pretend to seek diplomacy while behaving like pirates in one of the world's most important waterways. This is where the bazaar strategy meets reality. Trump's approach works if the other side ultimately wants a deal. It works if pressure convinces the other side to compromise. It works if both sides understand that bargaining has limits. But what happens when the other side uses negotiation as a weapon? What happens when talks become a delaying tactic? What happens when a regime signs or signals one thing, then tells the press something else? Trump appears to believe that is exactly what the Iranian regime has done. According to his remarks, the United States had reached an understanding on the central issue, no nuclear weapon. But then Iranian officials went outside and denied that the issue had even been discussed. To Trump, that was not ordinary bargaining. That was bad faith. And credibility is the foundation of every negotiation. Without credibility, agreements are just paper. From Israel's perspective, this matters enormously. For years, Israeli leaders have warned that the Iranian threat is not limited to centrifuges and enriched uranium. The nuclear program is one part of a much larger system. The Iranian regime funds Hezbollah. It arms Hamas. It backs the Houthis. It supports militias in Iraq and Syria. It threatens Gulf states. It represses its own people. And it repeatedly calls for Israel's destruction. Israel's argument has always been that the world cannot separate Iran's nuclear ambitions from the nature of the regime itself. Trump's remarks suggest he may now see the problem the same way. This is no longer just a technical dispute about enrichment levels. It is a question of whether the Islamic Republic can be trusted with any agreement at all. And that is a far more serious conclusion. There's also a lesson here for the broader Middle East. Strength created the opening. Military action created leverage. Sanctions created pressure. Diplomacy created a pathway. But bad faith can destroy all of it. No negotiation can survive if one party treats agreements as temporary tactics rather than bonding commitments. No ceasefire can hold if rockets are fired at ships the next day. No nuclear framework can succeed if the regime denies what it agreed to before the ink is even dry. A few weeks ago, I said Trump's Bazaar Strategy might resonate in the Middle East because it reflects a style of negotiation that many regional actors understand. Pressure, drama, leverage, walkaways. But even in a bazaar, there is one rule that matters. You still need to be able to trust the person across the table. Trump now seems to be saying he no longer does. Whether negotiations resume remain to be seen. Trump has changed course before. That unpredictability is part of his strategy. But these remarks felt different. Less like a bargaining tactic, more like a verdict. If that is true, then American policy toward Iran may be entering a new phase, one with less patience, more deterrence, less faith in diplomacy, more emphasis on consequences. For Israel and the Gulf states, that may be a welcome shift. For the Iranian people, it may also matter, because a regime that kills protesters, funds terror abroad, and lies to negotiators is not only a threat to Israel and the world, it is a threat to its own citizens. The question now is whether the United States will treat Iran as a difficult negotiating partner or as a regime whose bad faith has finally exhausted the bazaar.
This is Middle East Brief with Avi Kaner. If you want clarity, not noise, follow and share. Continue the conversation on X at Avi Kaner. Back tomorrow